can hear you, I hope. No, I can't hear you now. This is very interesting. Oh, you are muted, sir. We are live. Now, awesome. Now you're
there
fine.
We go. Very good.
Now you're fine. Yes. So how are you, James?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Surviving the stir craziness of this period that we're living through. Pretty
and
well.
You are COVID negative as far as you know?
As far as I know, but I've not been tested. So although
Yes.
I just got a email this morning that says that my health insurance provider will be providing apparently these 5-minute tests to all of its members if they need to come in for any other purpose. So
antibody tests.
Yeah,
Oh, that's beautiful.
That does appear to be quite a thing. Scripps Health has just announced that you come into Scripps, you're going to get the test.
Okay.
So, cool.
So I want to give the little preamble because I know you and I in the kind of, but we've been messaging about our take on this whole thing. And, for the record, you and I have sort of disagreed about whether lockdown was at all necessary or a good measure during this time period. But this morning, we have the great pleasure and I think honor of speaking to a couple of doctors who are part of the solution that I think you and I agree upon going forward, which is that we do need to get out of this lockdown that some politicians would like to make perpetual. And we want also to provide as much information or get as much information for people so that they can go back to work safely.
Right.
And
exactly right.
Yeah. So the two doctors that we get to speak to this morning are part of the solution to that. And I'm really excited to be able to speak with them. It's going to be Doctors Max Diamond and Nicholas Jauregui. They are two of the principals of a startup in Orange County that's called COVID19TEST.EXPERT. That's what the business is called. And we are joined right now by Dr. Nicholas Jauregui and Dr. Max Diamond. Welcome, gentlemen. I want to make sure that your audio is unmuted so that we can hear you and not just see you.
Welcome, real heroes. Yeah.
Yes, welcome to both of you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, we sure can.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us here today. And as I was communicating with you guys before when we were on the phone, I have just really some basic questions for you guys, a list of basic questions. Both James and I see what you guys are doing as a crucial part of the solution going forward to get us all back to work as soon as possible. And so I just wanted to ask you a little bit, can you give us a little bit about your backgrounds in medicine? And in particular, what was it that brought you guys together to work on this project of offering testing and, in effect, certification for individuals and businesses so they can get back to work?
Yes, Amy and James, thank you so much. Again, I'm Dr. Nicholas Jauregui, and I'm one of the co-founders of COVID19TEST.EXPERT. And Max and I have been working together for a number of years. Max is one of the senior chief medical officers at one of the large medical groups. And I've been working in the field of wellness and palliative care, taking care of the sickest of the sick, the most ill patients in our community. And we have collaborated for many years, I'm sure over 5 years, in taking care of these patients as a team. And we became compelled watching the terrible situation that's going on in our community, both, with our healthcare providers, with the patients, our friends and family and businesses, all suffering tremendously from the COVID-19 virus.
Am I right that your patients are among what people would call the most vulnerable?
Yes. Okay. We take care of patients that are, the most vulnerable. These are patients that are homebound. Most of them are seniors with significant illnesses, immunosuppression. These are the sickest of the sick that we take care of throughout the continuum of care, in the hospital, in the home setting. And so Dr. Diamond, who oversees the one of the largest medical groups in California, as one of the senior physicians there, he and I collaborate closely on these things. And when we both noted the destruction of what's happening to, families' livelihoods, watching what's happened to our patients, their families, we really felt compelled. We had to do something. We had to take what resources we've been blessed with as doctors and start to make a difference to get patients, families back to work, to get, businesses are really suffering. Individuals are really suffering tremendously. And so we see the path moving forward with COVID19TEST.EXPERT is a way of, it's really a wellness program to help people have information, to be empowered with information, to make their workplaces safe, to make their environment safe. Everybody's going to have to follow, safe practices. But right now, what we really want to do is empower them with information.
Yeah.
And
Knowledge is
that's
power,
talking
right?
about-
Knowledge is power, they always say. and
Knowledge
it's
is
for a
power.
reason, yeah.
If you know what your antibody status is, to the best that you can get that, if you can know whether you have the virus, this gives you information that you can now utilize to keep your work environment safe, to be able to go back to work, to build confidence in the community and those around you. Max, maybe you can talk a little bit about your background, but this is something that we really see this as an opportunity to do our part, among others doing their part, to get people back to work, get the economy going back again, really empower people with information.
Yes, because you don't want, when everybody goes out there, for the curve to go up exponentially again, which maybe is a possibility. And at the same time, you want people just to have the peace of mind and confidence going forward as well. Dr. Diamond, you had something to add?
Yeah, absolutely. No, Nick, you said that very well. We really got started because our own families are unemployed at this time. And I don't mean my immediate family, but my extended families across the country. And they are part of that 17 million Americans that have filed for unemployment just in the last 3 weeks. They are facing economic challenges, as I believe just about the entire country is. And we were asked as leaders repeatedly, what are we going to do about this problem? And Nick is right at the front line taking care of very ill patients. I feel like I'm at the front line managing the resources to be sure we get the resources to these individuals, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. And we were asked for what the other side of this is going to look like and how we can help get there, and really to help find a way home, right? To find a way home for everybody.
So with that said, what exact services are you guys offering? I've heard it's maybe kind of shifted a little bit in terms of what you're listing on your website, but what are you offering for businesses and what are you offering for individuals?
Well, the key thing I think is an assessment. We do a risk assessment. So different companies are going to have different levels of risk. And so we're going to be giving different recommendations based on those risks. And, of course, that includes assessing how close employees are working together in that business. Again, there's a whole spectrum. And of course, testing. We're adapting to the changing technologies, but it includes, if people go onto the website, the COVID19TEST.EXPERT, they can see, okay, I can be tested as an individual. I can have someone come to my home. Again, we're not testing sick people. These are well people that can come out of their home. We can test them both for the antibody test and the test for the actual virus.
So you're offering both of those to individuals as well as businesses.
That's right, to individuals and to employers. So employers also can test their employees, but there's not just testing. We're doing a risk assessment. We're then giving them recommendations. Those employees need to commit to behaviors that are going to minimize their risk of becoming infected or infecting others with the COVID-19 virus.
Absolutely.
Yes. So Dr. Diamond, maybe you could talk a little bit about what your,
Personal responsibility program involves limiting yourself to work, home, and essential services, understanding your risk personally, washing hands, perhaps wearing glove and mask at work, as well as when out, right? And of course, inviting that same habit to happen within that household. This allows employees to be able to return to work and know that their coworker has also been cleared, right? Has been
Right.
cleared in the sense that they are following these protocols and that there is daily monitoring. Each employee has to check in with our doctors every single day. If they display
Wow.
any symptoms, they may be asked to not work and be monitored. They may be retested, or it may go further. Perhaps those symptoms are unrelated, and we make a decision that they actually are safe to go to work. But it requires a daily participation by each employee in order for this to work, obviously.
Wow. But I mean, it's good. It sounds like it's very thorough. What is the state of the art with respect to the testing? Because as just, a layperson, I'm trying to scour every bit of information that I have about it. And it seems that some of the testing is unreliable, or maybe there is, a reliable version of a test, but then the resources are hard to get. What's your perspective on the testing right now?
Well, the testing, no testing is perfect. We're following the CDC and FDA guidelines on testing. And we can only work with the tools that we have. Right now there is testing to do nasopharyngeal testing for the virus itself.
Mm-hmm.
That tells you whether or not you have the virus from that test, and are you at risk for infecting others around you. And you kind of can divide it up into 8 categories. There's the virus, whether you yes or no if you have that, and then whether or not you have antibodies, which are the new antibodies we call the IgM, when you're most recently infected and starting to fight the virus.
Mm-hmm.
And then you form over time IgG, which is immunoglobulin for long term. That's what we form when we get a vaccine, for example. We have long-term immunity. If you've gotten the polio vaccine, for example, you have immunoglobulin G, or IgG. So that's the goal, is that you the only way you could really return to work safely is that you are virus negative. So that's number one, right? If you're positive for the nasopharyngeal swab, you can infect others, right?
Sure,
so you're not going back to work as long as that's in play. But then the immunoglobulin, you want to see IgG, which is a long-term immunity, along with virus negative if you've been exposed. Remember, somewhere in the neighborhood, as far as we know right now, again, this is an ongoing question, there's a lot of people that are infected that have no symptoms at all. They don't even know they're infected.
Right.
And so
in Germany,
yes.
don't we have like 15% of those all those tested positive for the antibody in some way? That's
different studies show different things. But what we know from the studies we've seen, that there was the Princess Cruise study, there was what was done in Iceland, what was done in Colorado, somewhere between 25 to 50% of people infected have no symptoms.
Wow.
So that's a lot of people. So you need to have confidence. And again, what we're trying to do with COVID-19 Test.expert is give people the opportunity to have some confidence in the people next to them working, that, hey, they've been tested to the best of our ability. Nothing's perfect, but we'll do the best we can. That's why we have to accept that in medicine and in life, to assure confidence that our people are tested and they're doing the behaviors as best as we can have them do those behaviors. They've made a contract and a commitment to being as safe as they can in that workplace. We need to get people back to work. The health damage to not getting people back to work is significant, and that should be emphasized. We need to do the best we can to get people back to work, and that's what COVID Test.expert does. Try to sort out those people who have immunity, that have been exposed, but the virus has now been cleared, and those people that never got exposed and don't have virus as well. So that's the thought there, and that's what we endeavor to do at COVID-19 Test.expert. Max, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I want to clarify who we're actually able and willing to test at this time.
Mm-hmm.
It is essential workers and their families. It is also individuals that perform essential duties on behalf of their household. If they are the caregiver or the one that needs to go to the grocery store and the pharmacy, right, we are willing to test those individuals.
Right.
Okay.
Like I'm the guy in the family who's been designated to do all the grocery shopping, and I wear a mask, and I use the sanitary wipes every time I go and come back. But you provide a service actually for the family member who does that?
Or it could also be the caregiver that does that. It may not be family. It may be someone who's your assistant. So whoever is servicing those essential workers also need to be tested because they're another risk of exposure. That's why the risk assessment that we do is so important. It's just not a matter of testing and moving on. You have to do a full risk assessment and mitigate that risk for that essential worker, which includes family and other essential providers to that essential workers' family themselves.
So you'll literally come into small businesses and homes and make an evaluation of what they should do and how they should go forward.
Exactly.
Not in homes, right?
Okay.
Business,
Okay.
for the
Okay.
business.
Okay.
The people have to come outside the front door, right?
Yes, they
That's
have to come
correct.
outside the front door and be able to close the front door behind them.
Right. I get it.
That's right.
And that's obviously to keep our staff safe as well.
Right.
Okay, so just to clarify, the individuals for whom you're providing the services, they must be either themselves essential workers as deemed by the state of California, or they must be the family member who is shopping or taking care of an essential worker, shopping for or taking care of. Is that right?
No, that they are essential to their household. Every household.
Oh,
has-
and so any household is qualified for you guys. I'm not less essential than, you know, okay.
The essential individual for that household, the one that is performing essential duties for that household.
Okay.
Or the one having to go to the grocery store and the pharmacy
Right.
repeatedly or to doctor's appointments, and you're that essential individual, we believe you can get tested and should get tested. Right?
Okay.
Very good.
And I think it's important to understand we're not being really restrictive on who decides to be tested, right? If I want to go get tested, then I should be able to be tested as long as I don't have symptoms. So, while we're targeting businesses that are providing essential duties, we're not stopping someone else from being empowered with information either, right?
Right.
So
Right.
if maybe I'm a restaurant owner and I want to be tested before eventually things get opened back up for me, I can get tested. We shouldn't withhold that information from folks who want to manage their own personal risk or the future risk when things start to open up again.
Well, I know
This may
right
be a
now,
wave.
right now we're allowed to do some takeout. And I know that I would go to a restaurant and order some takeout if they were certified along the lines of the type of, combination of testing, risk assessment, best practices for going forward. I would feel more confident ordering takeout from that restaurant now, even before they're allowed to open.
Yeah,
Right.
and those workers will feel more confident as they're working and reporting to work, knowing that all of their coworkers are under the same program.
Exactly. Much better workplace morale.
It's a matter of empowerment and a matter of having information so you can make informed decisions. That's what we're seeking to do. And we welcome others to do what we're doing and more. Like
Right.
we want to get America
Right.
working again, get us back to some level of normalcy, which we enjoyed before all of this happened. That
Right.
requires information and empowerment of people of all types. Of course, we want to prioritize the essential workers and businesses, but we want to empower everybody, really.
Right.
Okay.
And it sounds
So-
like this antibody test is really the key information to getting employers and the government the confidence that at least some people can go back to work. Those who've been exposed and are no longer a threat to people surely should at least be able to go back to work. And that information is just absolutely critical.
It's an important part. It's not all of it, right?
Do you not
The
have the
testing for
antibody
virus is
tests
also very
now?
important.
Do you not have the antibody tests available quite yet?
There are antibody tests available. There are kits that you can get. And that's a changing target every day. How reliable are those kits?
Right.
Again, that's something that's evolving over time. And science and scientists are working on that. We're going to use what tools we have to the highest reliability that's possible to get it to the community. But that's an evolving technology that's probably going to continue to evolve for years.
So, but that's the biggest challenge then maybe for you right now is to offer reliable antibody tests? Is that the biggest challenge that you have, or what has been your biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge has been waiting for a surplus of test availability. Those that are sick need to be tested first. They are the priority. Certain essential workers, police and fire, have been priorities. They remain a priority, and they will remain a priority. And so it has taken time for a surplus of testing to become available. So now we can move that to the asymptomatic population and talk about getting people back to work. And so that's been the biggest challenge, is waiting for the labs to increase capacity or to get their validation, their certification from the government in order to be able to do this.
Right, right. Now, is there anything else that either of you wanted to share, either with potential customers or with policymakers, before we wrap up?
We are looking, and well, we welcome any organizations that have resources that can help us to help get America working again. Absolutely. Please contact us through the website, COVID19TEST.EXPERT.
Yes, and I think the other message that I'd like to convey is a message of hope. A message that we will get through this. America has been through other very difficult situations before, and all of us working together, both government, private sector, every individual, doing what they can to make a difference to get people back to a life where they can be thriving. And that's our real goal. And that's what, COVID19TEST.EXPERT is about getting people back to their lives where they thrive. And that's what I would like to see happen. And I want all of us to work together to do that. This is a time not for division, but for us to hold hands together and get our households back running again like they were before. And
Yes.
And even better, I think at the end of this, on the other side of this, America and even the world will be stronger. And
Yes.
I do believe, my mother used to tell me this always, a struggle makes strength. And I do believe that this struggle will end and we will be stronger on the other side. But in the meantime, look around, see what you can do. Max and I and others and Katrina Ling were involved in this project. We simply are looking around and saying, what can we do? And we're doing the best we can. And we welcome others to join hands with us to get America working again.
Thank you very much. And thank you both for your time. Again, everybody, that is COVID19TEST.EXPERT, COVID19TEST.EXPERT. And again, this is the provision of crucial information that everybody as individuals needs, and then of companies, people who are in charge of a bunch of employees and resources that they need to make the best decisions going forward. And that's really, I think, what we have all been lacking. We feel like we've been so much in the dark, and I appreciate that you guys are trying to bring information to bear on this to the best that you can, given your resources. It's very helpful.
Yeah, thank you
And
guys.
I hope you're very successful
with
this, because you're taking a big risk yourselves as well. So kudos to you.
No, these guys are the real heroes that are going to get our economy back up and going again. So thank you guys for your time.
Thank you,
Thank you, Amy and James. We're really grateful for the opportunity to share what we can to get America back to work again.
Great. Thank you. And I hope to become a customer pretty quick. So watch for me. Okay.
First run this Saturday. So
okay, well, beautiful. I think you guys are booked out a little bit. Now you're going to be even more. I'm going to have to jump online right now and get myself signed up.
Everyone
so
in Southern California is going to sign up, right?
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Okay, we're going on gallery view. They're still hanging out. Goodbye, Dr. Jauregui. Take care.
Yeah, what a great service they're providing, huh?
Definitely. I was going to have us in gallery view the whole time, and then I decided, no, I'd rather, kind of switch back and forth, and hopefully I did that okay. I don't have fancy studio and, guys with all their cameras and things like that, so we tried to do that. So this is excellent. What I'm getting the sense of is that the testing is not to them the most sort of reliable part of the piece, that they're trying to give the best information that the current testing, given the limited resources
I
and
love
also the challenges of the reliability,
right.
that they're, you know,
I
they're
love
doing
the
the best they can.
admission. I love the admission there. It's not just home tests. It's any test has a certain unreliability to it. No test is perfect, even a test you might get in the hospital. So
Yeah.
that's absolutely true. And of course, what I also like is that they're taking a holistic approach for their clients, whether they're homes or small businesses, in terms of their risk assessment, which of
Yes.
course is the test is only one part of that wider holistic perspective.
No,
So
and it's got to be. But yeah, I mean, imagine probably with some businesses, they're going to be doing repeated periodic testing and things
right,
like that, because
right.
at least with the swab test, which it sounds like that's the main one that they have ready to go right now,
Yeah.
that, you know, it gives you a moment in time. The beautiful thing about that IgG test that he mentioned is that it just lets you know, okay, you've been exposed. And we all know, regardless of what the rumor mongers are, that the time that you've been exposed is sometime in the last few months. And so probably you've got several months at least of immunity going
Right.
forward. Even that is a guess, right? So, I mean,
Well, until we have more long-term information, I mean, viruses are so simple. They're just RNA and they mutate so quickly that we really don't know if slight variation might recur and recur and recur, you know, and just repeat like a flu season or something.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I was going to share with you, I got an email this morning because I have a listener, and he knows I'm referring to him repeatedly, but I'm just still not going to put his name out there. And he and his wife live in the state of Washington, and they have, as far as I can tell from everything that they've ever written me, they have been affected by COVID. They actually did have COVID. And so he wrote me this morning because basically, I guess I had gotten the wrong impression. I had been under the impression that his experience with it is similar to what John Taylor, the bass player for Duran Duran, had reported his experience as having been, which was a turbocharged flu, and that it was just a really hardcore, horrible experience. And here is what my listener reports to me. He says, I suspect you were mentioning my wife and I as the couple who had COVID. He says, if so, and he is describing exactly how it was. He says, I wouldn't characterize my experience as a turbocharged flu. It was more unusual, strange, and mild. He said, I was fatigued mostly during the week, hard to focus, reading, but watching TV was fine. The second week, when I thought I was over it, I had the weird sensation of reduced lung volume and a pain taking a deep breath. He says, I felt like I was super congested, but without any congestion. And so I'll stop there for a second. I'll read it more in a second, but he says, he said that, and that is in line with what I'm hearing more lately, which is that this is really not like a pneumonia. And it probably doesn't call for a ventilator. You've heard lately that they're saying maybe the ventilators weren't such a great idea. That the biggest thing is that this is inhibiting the ability of the lungs to absorb oxygen. And so that perhaps it's more giving more oxygen to people than it is, mechanically assisting the lungs with the ventilator. Anyway, so I'll continue. I mean, that just goes right in line with it, right? That, it's like he's not breathing well, but it's not really congestion. So he says, the next 2 days, I also had a whooping like cough every couple minutes. That was different, but not painful at all. So that's weird, right? Because I got the impression they're in massive pain. And I was, from some descriptions that I've read of like the cough and everything, I felt like, God, I would go to the hospital immediately, and these people are staying home. But now I'm starting to understand maybe why, because it's not quite as scary. It's just weird. He says, each day my lung volume, deep breath pain improved. He says, I did take a decongestant, which produced clear mucus from my lungs, and slept with the humidifier for 2 to 3 nights. Then it was over. Roughly 2 weeks from start to end for me, but not really that bad at all. And he says, you rightly mentioned that the normal flu can be serious. It kills 35,000 Americans every year. He says it's a long story, but at the end of 2019, while vacationing in Puerto Rico, he was quite ill, 5 times worse than the COVID experience. And it ended up, it was
Wow.
influenza B. So he had
Oh,
an
yeah.
influenza B that was 5 times worse.
A nasty flu.
Um,
Yeah.
And then he's really appreciative that I and my partner, when I was on a hangout, we suggested COVID. He says it happened so early, late January, we only joked about it being COVID, but that spurred me to investigate the timeline and the symptoms with more scrutiny. He says for his wife, it was barely a speed bump, a little tired, a minor cough and sore throat, and 4 days later, she was completely fine. He says, we'd been skiing, and then my first sign of fatigue set in. Our instructor mentioned he fell ill after our first day together. I reached out recently to inquire if he suspected COVID. He replied, yeah, I suspected I had COVID just after I taught you guys. Sorry if I passed it on, right? He says, I was on my back, deathly ill with a cold deep in my lungs for about 2 weeks. So he had something similar. He says,
And
these
2
are
weeks is the period. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So that seems to be, in any event, that's the latest. So, in terms of testing and getting information out there, it does seem that reliability of testing, that testing itself is not going to make us be able to be all complacent as we go out in the world.
Well, it's an astonishing thing because the testing can't be perfect, and yet it's the testing information that is absolutely critical to getting the confidence, at least. See, if we have a standard of 0 risk is required,
Right.
then of course we need to know how are we going to do that. But at least if that's going to be their operative standard, we can know through the antibody tests, however accurate or inaccurate or how much time they take, at least we can know that these are absolutely safe people to go back to work. The death toll from the shutdown is something we don't know any more than we know the mortality rate.
Yeah, I see people speculating about that. And
well, there are 2 things we're speculating about: the mortality rate from the disease and the mortality rate from the economic tsunami.
Exactly.
Going to crest upon us. And if someone tells me they know which is more deadly, I know they're lying.
Yes.
And if someone says we have to continue the shutdown indefinitely, then those people are obviously totally ignorant or callous to the death toll from the economic shutdown.
and power lusters besides, excuse my psychologizing.
Yeah, and power lusters besides, right? I can, a position of, well, let's, take quarantine people until we can figure something out, was of course the result of not having good tests and regulatory red tape.
And watching what was going on in Italy too, right? We're saying we don't want that to happen here.
Of course not.
We don't know exactly what conspired together to make what happened in Italy happen.
Exactly. And this was a very fascinating week for data. As you point out, we are now realizing that we sort of panicked on the respirators. We're not going to need the resources with respirators that we thought we might need, hundreds of thousands.
No, there's other kinds of resources that become more crucial as information is more available. It's all about providing as much information as possible.
The Germany statistic that I mentioned earlier, they're showing that at least 15% of those tested are testing positive in some way for having had the disease. That means that the mortality rate, as they've calculated it in Germany, is something short of 0.5 of 1%.
Wow. And so then there was the Iceland model that was going around. There was a guy who wrote an article on Medium, and he was extrapolating from the Iceland data, because in Iceland the population is small enough and they have enough resources to test a much wider swath of the population. And so he was saying 2 things. One, that he thought, again, that the death rate, if you really are accurate about it, was going to end up being about 0.06 or something, right? And then the other thing is that he suspects, and again, this is, everybody's got their hypotheses and it's hard to know now, we're going to know in a few months, maybe in a few months, people who said, oh, there was no lockdown necessary at all, maybe they will be right. But based on everything that I saw, at least a few weeks ago, it seemed like, no, this is an emergency. Let's hang tight for a couple weeks and figure it out and get some stuff ramped up to deal with it.
Isn't it a funny thing? It's the ignorance about the disease which justifies the draconian shutdown. no one pauses to think about our the black box that is in fact the effect of the economic shutdown. So if we don't know something about the disease's effect, and we don't know something about we know there will be some mortality from the economic effect, we just don't know how much, which ignorance wins? What we did is we said
Well,
that
I mean, so here,
the ignorance about the economic shutdown.
Here's
At least in the short term.
analogy. Here's the analogy. So suppose I own a big, huge stadium, and I have a big old event scheduled. There's going to be, I don't know, I'll just be like, completely fantasy pie in the sky. Haley Mary's one of my favorite musicians. And so suppose she's like a superstar and it's this huge stadium and she's going to play a concert at the thing. Okay. So, big crowd, all these tickets and everything. And then for some reason, suppose we've got, this is just all fantasy. Okay. So we've got beautiful weather forecasting that is just so accurate. And there's a tornado warning for that exact time, that I'm going to have the Haley Mary concert. Right. So if I, have the concert, there is some risk that this tornado is going to come right through my stadium and, maybe kill a bunch of people. Right. That's kind of right. So then you have to say, okay, well, weigh one versus the other. Am I going to call that off? And then, well, what about all of the employees that I was going to pay and their livelihoods and right? And you're making this judgment call. I think it's easy right now as we see the curve flattening, because it is, and part of it could be because there was no lockdown necessary and we overshot, or it could be the effect of the lockdown measure that's helping to flat. So, once we see that, for instance, there hasn't been the run on ventilators that everybody anticipated and warned about, that the death rates are going down, and this is true basically all over the world. It's easy to look at that and say, oh gosh, it wasn't necessary at all. But if you think about kind of where we were before and you say, okay, well, we see what's going on in Italy and the heart-wrenching decisions and that doctors are being, having to make and all of this stuff, it seemed warranted to do something very limited.
Well,
for a very short period of time, which is all that I've ever been for.
When you have death rates that were 6% at one point in some places, but then it went down to like 3%, even a 3% death rate would have implied millions and millions of deaths. That's scary. Yeah. That's very, very scary.
And overwhelming to the medical system, which is a huge piece of it.
And the fear, and we had genuine fears that our completely depleted, semi-socialized Medicare system could not adequately handle what was coming to it. And I think we saw that in places like Italy.
And that way that you're phrasing it right now even depersonalizes it, right? So I'm thinking of the doctors and the nurses who are on the front lines with an insane viral load coming at them all the time.
Of course.
And so, so think about the viral load and the psychological load that these healthcare professionals would be facing. And I was more than willing to stay home
and in
for
Italy,
a little bit.
Listening to the doctors and nurses that were being interviewed in Italy was heart-wrenching. Listening to triage doctors and nurses say we just had to decide who was going to be we were going to have to let die versus who we could actually treat was absolutely horrifying. And that shockwave got the fear of God, I think, into everyone about how our medical system could be overwhelmed. But thank goodness this week, has really kind of shown that we're probably not. I mean, in New York, we had a real up to the edge problem.
Yes.
But it really looks like we're going to avoid the worst of their projections. And on the issue of projections, which is really basically all that we've been using for all this, we've gone from millions potentially dead to hundreds of thousands potentially dead to a couple 100,000 potentially dead. Now the CDC's model is saying only about 60,000 people will die this year from COVID-19 in the United States.
Wow. Okay. So these are much better projections, but my question is, does that projection count on indefinite shutdown going forward? I sure as hell hope not.
No, I don't think it does.
Okay.
I think I'm not, well.
I mean, this is the thing, right? Because
I don't think they can really know, or we can really know, because part of it is how widespread was the disease before we even started the shutdown? That is to
Right.
say, if 15, 20% of the population was already infected by the time the shutdown happened, the effectiveness of the shutdown can be questioned as such, I think. Now, if that's not the case, that is to say, if we actually slowed the spread and possibly saved lives in the near term, which was really the only logical justification for it, right?
Well, okay, so let's think about that 15%, right? So the reason that we say, oh gosh, 15% is because a lot of them were walking around as asymptomatic
Right.
carriers. Now,
Yeah, up to half of them, the doctor just told us. Something
right.
between 35 to 50%, 25 to 50%, he said, are asymptomatic and may not even have known that they have
Right. So if we ended up stopping the level of asymptomatic carriers because of the forced shutdown, that is maybe the good thing that kept it from going up exponentially.
Or,
So we could hypothesize back and forth all day, right?
well, and there are those who say that it actually did bad because it prevented herd immunity from developing quickly. Every year between 25.
But still, along with developing that herd immunity, you may have, for instance, I mean, New York was late calling for
Yeah.
their shutdown, okay?
Yeah.
But imagine maybe if they hadn't, then you would have tipped over in New York, and you would have had the doctors in New York faced with the horrific situations that Spain now, says
Right.
Enric in the chat room. And
Right.
then, before, of course, Italy. You just want to avoid that if possible. But
Well,
I think, so what we really want to know is, the CDC, are they offering these relatively rosy? I mean, we're talking about 60,000 people dying. This is still, we wish we could
well,
avoid that, right?
between 25 and 55,000 people die of regular flu every year.
Right.
Just every year. Almost
Right.
that number of people will die. I mean, this year we have a particularly bad one, right? So they say this flu season could.
Well, okay, so I have questions about that, right? We had a particularly bad flu season this year. How much of those were
That was
COVID?
COVID, exactly.
How much of those were COVID? And we didn't know?
Until we get a better understanding of how widespread the disease was.
Reliable antibody tests giving
Right.
us all the IgG data. Anybody who had a flu, it'd be good to test them.
But last year before COVID happened, what was it? 30,000 deaths from regular flu.
Okay.
So now it's true that they've got some interesting statistics. COVID-19 is more fatal apparently than cancer or heart disease this year, given the number of deaths so far.
Okay.
But I also heard, this is kind of disturbing, that comorbidities aren't really reported as the cause of death, even if they were the greater problem. That is to say, a lot of times when people just have the regular flu, one of the reasons why they get pneumonia and die from regular flu is because they had a compromised immune system in some other way.
Right.
And if a person has cancer or a heart attack and then gets COVID-19 and then dies, how do we record that cause of death? Do we record it as COVID-19 or do we record it as the cancer or heart disease that they had coming into it, but for which they would not have died? So cause of death too, I think we need to look into all the cause of deaths that are being attributed to COVID-19.
Yeah, we don't want to see them either under-reporting or over-reporting.
Correct. So we may have flu cases that were COVID-19 that people just got over. And then of course, some of the death rate that is being recorded for COVID-19 might really have more to do with, say, the prostate cancer or the breast cancer that the person had, as opposed to the COVID-19.
Yeah, no, and they are still learning so much about why it is that it hits certain people harder than other people, but again, the thing that I really hope is that the current relatively more optimistic projections out of the CDC, that is not predicated on keeping everybody at home indefinitely while the government maintains its monopoly over the information that could be gotten from testing. We need to let entrepreneurs like Dr. Jauregui and Diamond, who we spoke with earlier, need to let them offer solutions. The other story that I circulated this morning that I was excited about is that Amazon is going to try to do its own in-house testing. And, they say, and, again, everybody's talking about, I think the more honest people are talking about the resource limitations and the accuracy limitations of the testing itself. Amazon says hey, we don't know if we're going to be able to ramp up the ability to offer this testing very well within the limited time period, but hey, we're going to try to do it. And we're going to share whatever knowledge that we gain by doing this. And I say, bravo, Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
Bravo. This makes me proud to be Amazon customer. This makes me proud to have been on Tucker, challenging Tucker when he was attacking Amazon. Was it a year and a half ago or something like that? I don't know. It was, you know, why do they have a moral duty to do your bidding,
Right.
Tucker? They do a tremendous job, and yeah,
big tech. With all due respect to Tucker Carlson, well, the big tech firms have been one of the great solutions and reasons why we kind of get through the lockdown as far as we have. Without Zoom, without Facebook, without teleconferencing, education would be cut down, business conferences would be cut down, all commerce would be basically cut down if people couldn't do what we're doing right here. I think we all need to tip our hat and with some gratitude to high tech that have sort of made this as livable as it has been.
Yes.
One thing that I think we probably do agree on is that going forward, this cannot last.
No.
The death toll from, and it's not just the death toll from the economic shutdown, should it continue, because, you know, it's not just other causes of death that I think policymakers may be ignoring, but life itself. The point of life is not to survive and survive COVID-19.
No.
The point of life, as the doctor said today,
yeah, and
I really love the way he put it, thrive.
Thrive.
That's what this is all about.
No, it's excellent. And, you know, the thing that I talked about so much on Wednesday, and I got quite upset about it, and, you know, who knows, some people, she's too emotional, but this is, as I see it, it's, you could say, okay, it's an emergency. And yeah, you should help in an emergency, but that is limited. And as I emphasized from the essay that I still actually, you know, I should have put my book away, but I still have it sitting right here, right? The essay called Ethics of Emergency and Virtue of Selfishness. She does say, yes, you know, you should help in an emergency, but what's the focus? Getting back to normal life as soon as possible, because it's normal life where we say, no, you know, we don't just sit in our houses, and we certainly don't have government ordering us to sit in our houses and asking us for our papers as we walk around and giving us fines and not letting us go to beaches and parks and, you know, telling restaurants that that they can't do business at all and everything. There's a very limited role for government, even in an emergency like you know, an actual pandemic. And again, we may not know. Yeah,
even an emergency they caused.
Well, exactly. And they're part of the emergency. I mean, it's a horrible calculus that I've gone through in saying, okay, lockdown for a few weeks, but it's, you know, it's lockdown for a few weeks. And then government, my gosh, you know, the emergency is over, and, you know, that you get back to normal life as soon as possible. That's the focus of any moral person dealing with an emergency, because life is not made of constant emergency.
Academia and the media have trained us all. This is the blank out from Atlas Shrugged in spades. Economic activity, productive activity. What is that? That's just, you know, the goods are here. And the Hank Reardon's little, you know, aren't they still making all the goods for us? When
You'll
we go
find
to
a way, yeah.
Yeah, when we go to the store to get our toilet paper and hand sanitizers, isn't someone making it and delivering it to the stores for us? It's astonishing what is taken for granted, what is assumed, and what is not recognized. The life-giving power of economic activity. I'll go further. The life-giving power of profit.
Yes.
Because it is particularly in a moment like this that we need to have profit, inspiring people to make tests, improve the situation of that way, and in any other way we can in terms of getting the economy back and going again. Right. Honestly, the devastation so far I am terrified as to the wreckage that is already in the cards for our economy, with millions upon millions of people having been thrown out of work. Surely thousands of small businesses are already snuffed out of existence simply from what the government has done. Every day that this continues, there will be more death from the economic shutdown.
Okay, well, there will be more displacement for sure. How much death there will be is another question.
Right. So we don't know the death there, but somehow that ignorance is less important than the ignorance we have about a disease
Yeah,
as to
no.
whether it's 0.5
Okay, right, right.
mortality.
But I say within a very limited period of time, if you do have a real emergency, you do set aside the economics for a moment. Okay, but the moment has passed, right? And
Sure.
so now we are seeing.
When a war happens, and we
Yes,
put
yes.
aside economics and we deal with the war, because that's a life and death situation
Right,
for our whole system.
right.
If you can tell me that there's a life and death situation like that for our system, sure. Was this? I still don't know.
Well, and we don't know for sure, right? And so people, I would say reasonable people could maybe disagree about that. And some of it that might be coming into play is where this all plays in your own particular hierarchy of values as well. And that's hard not to bring to bear on a situation. We are not Rawlsians. We are not Rawlsians who say, let's evaluate from behind the veil of ignorance either, right? So that could be a source of part of the disagreement, because this is what I was talking about on Wednesday was, yeah, help, but everybody should help only to the extent that it's not a sacrifice.
Exactly.
And for some people in today's really messed up mixed economy situation have been forced to or called upon to actually sacrifice, right? So that's something that shouldn't be necessary. And the only reason that it's necessary is because of the extent to which our government has really messed up in dealing with this situation. And, they should have had stockpiles of the supplies necessary to implement whatever testing protocol there is.
The science and the technology has nothing to do with the antigen test. It was all red tape. The science and technology had nothing to do with the delayed swab tests that came out. That was all economic, regulatory red tape. We could have had the same testing set of protocols a month and a half ago.
Well, okay, but then there are actual physical limitations if you don't have enough swabs, for example, or if you don't have enough machines and
now, of course, had we been on
right?
this 6 weeks ago, we'd be in a totally different situation with respect to all that as well.
Yeah.
No. This is totally a government-caused issue, and although testing is no autumn panacea, it's still because of our ignorance early on, when we should have had an antibody test back in February. That the ignorance that has caused creates this black box that we're all maybe hugely overreacting to right now. And if this goes on, I know it's an overreaction. I know it's going to be an overreaction.
Oh, no. Yeah, I think if this goes on further, then it is definitely an overreaction. Right now, it is time for the type of strategies that the two doctors talked about earlier. And there's one other piece of it that I wanted to talk about with you as well, James, because this is more law geek stuff that we get into. There's limited information that comes from the testing, and what we need to know is where to spend those resources such that we give the most number of people the most amount of useful information. And one way that has been used in some countries, that is starting to be used, as far as I know, to some extent here, I know that there are people ready to really just implement it on a wide scale, is the use of data technology, right? So whereas the resources with the swabs and actual testing are limited by physical things, data can just be, gathered and sent out and stuff. And all you need are the bits and bytes and the internet, the infrastructure that we've already got out there. So what do you think about the tracking, for example, of COVID positive people in a pseudonymous way or anonymous way? And then taking that information and distributing it to others and say, for example, okay, James, you were at XYZ supermarket on such and such a day, and so was this COVID positive person, and maybe you should go and get yourself tested.
Oh yeah, I'm all in favor of that. Now obviously anything the government does is a two-edged sword. How is our privacy treated by the government in that context is, this
doesn't have to be implemented by government, first of all, right?
Exactly. If it's purely private, then obviously it's voluntary and I'm agreeing whatever the agreement is, but it's when the government comes on and imposes sort of a solution, they're going to make some arbitrary lines about what our privacy is. But if I am positive, they should surely tell me. That surely has an impact on they're the government, I could say, can even come in and restrict my behavior. If
Well,
I know
and this is where I say that even if the government came into, for example, our cell phone provider and said, okay, we have these COVID positive individuals and we're going to go to their cell phone provider and we're going to look at the last, 3 weeks or whatever of their location data.
Yeah.
And then we're going to look at people who were in the same place at the same time as those people, and we're going to go there and test them. And suppose you had a very strictly defined, again, this is emergency, right? This is on the premise. We have an emergency and these people are vectors of a potentially serious disease with, at the time we think 6% death rate, mortality rate, whatever. Again, we have to question whether I'm right about the evaluation of it's being an emergency. I do think it is, or at least it appeared to be. For a time,
qualifies
right?
as an emergency.
Yeah. So
60,000 people will still die in America.
Yeah, exactly. And you can help. And that's the thing. The numerical thing always bugged me, right? Because it's like, it's an emergency if somebody is under a car and there's one person. That's an emergency.
Right.
Now the question is, how much can you and within your hierarchy of values do to help that person, right? That's a separate issue.
Yeah, well, 15 million people out of work is an emergency too.
No, exactly. And so this, here I am. I'm trying interviewing these guys and trying to give them a platform to the extent I can to help us all get back to work, right? So we help people, and have fun doing it. But anyway, so where was I with this? Oh yeah. So if they were to narrowly tailor the policy of invading people's privacy, right? But to the extent that they can, and today we have this wonderful technology that allows the data to be anonymized, pseudonymized.
Exactly.
So the government could just come in and say, hey, we have this individual, we want you to do this, and then send a push notification out to blah, blah, blah. And as long as it's anonymized or pseudonymized and it's very narrowly tailored, and it doesn't go on forever like the Patriot Act after 9/11. And that we don't want these indefinite power grabs.
But I don't see the problem. If someone tests positive for a contagious, deadly disease, I don't see the problem, especially in a lot of contexts, like you say, it's pseudonymized or anonymized, at least to some extent. I don't see, and not to the person involved. They should be told, and as I say, the law can affect their behavior and should be able to affect their behavior.
Yes.
Just first cut, even in an ideal objectivist world, that should be the case. But given the fact that we have a government-caused emergency of their creation, it does seem to me this is critical information, and I don't see the problem with government tracking people who test positive. Do not see that at all.
Well, tracking and then releasing information out to other individuals who are in the same place.
To selected individuals, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
On a need to know basis, yeah.
Yeah. No, and again, very narrowly tailored, because this is an emergency measure. This is not an indefinite blank check for a Gavin Newsom to lock everybody down forever and track everybody forever, or whatever fantasy he's got in his mind. Okay.
Oh yeah, just listening to the way, one of the most disturbing things about this is listening to the way a lot of the media is talking about it. Boy, we really see how we need government, and how this proves that we need 10 times the government, and that intrusive government regulations are really what we needed all along. It's really distressing, kind of depressing, actually.
No, it really is. And along those lines, I actually want to read the pull quote that I've got from the New York Times piece that I actually had to stop reading this morning. It started where they were, lionizing both, the response of Abraham Lincoln and certain very infrastructure spending sort of things that he did. Actually, I guess one of the things that they did, I didn't object to, right? So there was, of course, this huge American territory, And there's homestead type acts where you say, okay, if you go out there and you actually make use of 160 acres or whatever it is, you can own this. As an initial distribution of property. I don't have a problem with that.
Oh, that's the way to go with government-owned property. Yeah,
right. But should the government have invested in a transcontinental railroad, for example?
That was something
No.
Lincoln signed that was pure boondoggle. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, we were going to have a transcontinental railroad. It was going to happen without government, and it did. But Lincoln actually signed that boondoggle into being.
Yeah. So not that so much. Then they went on to, praise FDR for everything that he did after the Depression.
Aggravate the Depression. He extended the Depression for several years through insane economic policies that only made the Depression worse.
And so then they go on and they, basically say, okay, this crisis of COVID, and now there's all these people out of work, so they're going to be sympathetic to this. We are going to propose that the government use this opportunity to tackle income inequality and all the right. So here's the paragraph after which I stopped reading the piece. I'm going to read it now. Over the past half century, the fabric of American democracy has been stretched thin. The nation has countenanced debilitating decay in its public institutions and a concentration of economic power not seen since the 1920s. While many Americans live without financial security or opportunity, a relative handful of families holds much of the nation's wealth. Holds not produces, but holds.
And they're meanly hoarding it, holding it back from us, the rest of us, right?
Over the past decade, the wealth of the top 1% of households has surpassed the combined wealth of the bottom 80%. Dun-dun. So now that there are a lot of people, because of this crisis, in worse situations than they were before, they are now more receptive to, government should give me and be. And
the government, of course, has made it systematically harder for people to start small businesses or get out of poverty, with their regulations and taxes and red tape. Of course, the main obstacle to economic equality and that is the government itself. But why economic equality as such is a value, no one even questions. If that 1% earned it, as you say, they earned it, and it's theirs. We should all do a golf clap because everyone else is better off because they earned it, not worse off because they earned it.
They're not holding it. They produced it.
The idea that there's somehow something that hurts me because someone else is rich is just insane.
No, and then here's an example. So Benjamin just sent me this. This is and this also ties into the data piece that we talked about a minute ago. Top 1% and these, entrepreneurs that everybody envies, or the New York Times envies because they can't dream of it. Apple and Google, big companies, evil corporations. So what are they doing? Apple and Google team up right now in the emergency to contact trace, is what they're calling it, the coronavirus. The technology giants said they would embed a feature in iPhones and Android devices to enable users to track infected people they'd come close to.
That's great. And here you've got Apple and Google, those mean profit-seeking companies, providing a service that I cannot imagine the government right now being able to provide. And as I say, Apple and Google have actually made the shutdown as bearable as it has been because of computers and teleconferencing and things. I mean, if it weren't for big tech, we'd really be in a much worse miserable shape if that could be.
I mean, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because we're still in a situation where the third party doctrine applies. And so we're in this lockdown such that I can't meet with you face to face, James, and, talk about all of our opinions of our various politicians and stuff. If we do it, and of course I do it over this Zoom meeting live streamed on YouTube, right? But there's no private conversations really right now given the current state of the law with the third-party doctrine, plus the fact that we are all
Right.
communicating over these. The only last bastion of secure communication is encrypted communication.
Right.
And what are our politicians doing during this crisis? They're busy trying to outlaw encrypted communication via
Right.
the so-called Earn It Act,
Right.
under
Right.
the guise of, attacking child pornography or whatever.
Somehow you get the impression that these bureaucrats would really love a world in which the lockdown continued forever. The
Yep.
only form of human communication would be through Zoom, so that they could check it out themselves anytime they want. So there'd be no private communication.
And they're having a field day right now.
Yeah.
So that's where I start to want to use gestures that I'm going to withhold and not do.
Yeah. So many
Um,
friends of mine are using Zoom now to communicate with their family and friends.
Yep. Nope. All of this great technology. So kudos to Apple and Google. They're building software into the smartphones. I might actually, do the update on my software and get into
Exactly.
this, right?
Exactly.
They're teaming up to release the tool. within several months. Okay. It's still
Yeah.
a ways out. Okay.
Right. But you see, it would be impossible for the government to even conceive of bringing something online like that this year.
No, that's true.
I'm still pretty confident. Yeah.
No, and it says their joint effort has came together in just the last 2 weeks.
Right.
So, once they do this though, right, once they ramp this up, then it could be used and applied to any future virus that is released by the China viral labs or what.
For whatever the cause of this was.
Whatever
Right,
the
exactly.
cause of this is,
Right.
yeah. What did you make of that, by the way, James? That story that was zooming around, that's basically that it came out of a lab and then it was maybe spread via the wet market only because someone who worked at the lab was there or something. What's your?
I wouldn't if I'm judging China's character, would I put it past them? No. Does it strike me as a bit of a conspiracy theory because China itself was the first country to suffer so badly with it? Yeah. And
Well, no, I don't think that the conspiracy. I don't think that the theory is.
Oh no,
that
that
it
theory
was,
is out there.
Well, no. But I don't think the theory states that this was purposeful.
Right.
Okay.
Well, there is such a conspiracy theory out there.
Oh, okay. So the one that I saw the Ezra Levant version
Right.
of this theory, and
The milder version of it.
Well, it's milder. The one thing that he didn't emphasize that I would have emphasized just a tiny bit more than he did, it was there, but you had to actually read it, which was this program that apparently exists in China, if you believe this story. The program is to isolate and study these viruses for the purposes of creating vaccines and protecting people.
Right.
Okay. Now the Chinese, they're doing this and they're, all this bravado, and they are the best in the world at doing this. And this is all part of the little documentary that Levant showed the clips of on his YouTube piece. You'd say, okay, well, this is just hubris of the Chinese, and they will go out there and they don't really care about the health of their scientists and their people that much. They just want to be number one, that sort of stuff that sometimes a regime like that would do. Not deliberately, but just sort of, reckless about the risk that it might pose to people. And so that
Right.
sure enough, in trying to do this and be the best in the world at isolating in these viruses, then something goes wrong. And they want to cover that up and hide it up because this was a program that they were going to brag about to the whole world. And then look, it's causing the deaths of all these people. That's the way I see the story.
Right. And there is a very complex, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and that's the best we can do on that version of it. It does seem that, but I mean, China might have behaved this way anyway. China is that way. I mean, an authoritarian government is going to, try and cover up their own missteps. And
Status is
even,
going to stay.
yeah, status is going to be status. And that's the way to look at it. On the other hand, I don't know if they were that smart and that, they're engineering it like that.
Yeah.
Hard to know. I don't know.
People in the chat over here at YouTube are concerned with the same thing that you and I are. Gail says, I think we will move towards collectivism now very rapidly. The power grab is just too tempting. I hope that that is wrong. And again, the way forward that anybody who believes in actual Americanism should be cheering is what the doctors are trying to do, which is whatever resources that we have to bring to bear, they are using those to provide as much information and risk mitigating advice that they can to the people who want to get back to work. They believe, and I agree with them, that there is a safe way to get back to work right now, even while the testing is still not perfect. You can give somebody a reasonably reliable swab, check also that there's no symptoms, and implement best practices going forward and just get back to work.
Well, I don't mean to use the analogy again, but it's sort of a joke, but surely it would have been cheaper for the government if they could have. Obviously we don't have 150 million hazmat suits, but it would have been cheaper to give everyone who works outside the home a hazmat suit than what they're going through right now. But no, we can't trust them with the hazmat suit because after all, they may take the glove off and wipe their eye, scratch their eye or something. So so long as we don't trust people to that extent, surely though, the hazmat suit would have been a more economically viable activity.
Yeah, and so this is where I doubt their motives, right? Because the story the other day from NPR, actually, NPR put this story out in the version I saw it, was that they were going to, as of today, the federal government was going to, as of today, withdraw all of its funding for testing. And so then you ask, the $2 trillion stimulus that they just rushed through and they've passed, they weren't going to have any more money for testing?
That's insane.
In that?
That's insane.
So that's where you think, what are their motives? Their motives are not to help us get the information that we need to alleviate the fear that we might have going forward, going back to work.
Right.
Because if they cared about giving us the real information that we need to assess our risk, et cetera, they would have continued to make testing a top priority in that $2 trillion.
Oh yeah. 2-point-something trillion dollars, and that's just one phase of several phases they have planned. No,
shame on you, federal government. Shame on you.
Testing would have been priority number one, and the first thing they addressed.
Exactly.
But
they're all talking about, and so now, as far as I understand it, Fauci and them, they're basically still saying, let's just keep having indefinite lockdown and whatever.
That's what Fauci's saying.
And as much as he is respected as an epidemiologist, he should not be a policymaker.
Like I say, I wouldn't put Einstein in charge of public policy. There's two different things. I don't care how brilliant they are as scientists. Very often, scientists, though, you scratch them just a little. They're totalitarians from their own perspective. You scratch an engineer, we should have engineering totalitarianism. Scratch a doctor, we should have medical totalitarianism, because after all, disease is all there really is. And experts very often tend to look at the world through their own narrow lens. And instead of looking at it from the broader standpoint of how many people are going to die from the economic shutdown, we don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask him, what is the other things being equal, what is the very optimal thing you could do to minimize the spread of coronavirus, then maybe he could tell you exactly what that is and why. But that's one piece of the puzzle. And like you say, you have to balance living. And you could declare that there's something an emergency for a limited period of time, but that is not the accepted state of human life.
What if doctors? I mean, when I hear the president talking about how handshaking should be a thing of the past, that freaks me out.
It may end up being, though, James. I mean, I could see going forward that we're going to
let's say that the doctors say that hugging and kissing really is the main cause of spreading some disease. I mean, what the heck? Are we going to outlaw hugging and kissing, or make that a socially
Well, you're going to be more careful who you hug and kiss.
or
that's all.
you see two people hugging in public, you're going to look at them, oh, how dare you hug in public, you're endangering my health because you're
No,
spreading disease.
no. I'm
Well,
talking about my personal decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but what are we, how much do we let something like this actually affect our lifestyle to the point that I mean, obviously, if I can save a life, I'll not shake hands, at least in a certain context.
Yeah.
If you tell me that I can never shake hands again, well, maybe I won't, maybe that'll be okay. But at what point do we say, no, the needs of life trump this fear of death? And we cannot go around living like it's fear of death that's the main motivator.
No.
That's why doctors should not be in charge of public policy.
No. I have, for example, since they've been saying, oh, masks are now good, masks are in, masks are out, it's like coffee, is coffee good for you? Okay, this week's it's good, then it's bad, masks are good, masks are not. I have not, and I was glad to see that Amish Adalja is the same way. I don't wear a mask out there. If I go, especially, I'm going to go walk my dog. I'm so far away from anybody else. My dog barks at everybody anyway.
Oh, well, no, I want to come up and pet your dog. You see, if I can't do that simple little thing of a neighbor walking,
my dog doesn't want you to pet her anyway. Though she's antisocial.
Okay,
I call her, we call her the social distancing dog. She's like automatic built-in social distancing.
She's already a good social distancer. But you know what I'm saying? If I see a neighbor that I know or a dog that I like and I know is friendly, I can't right now walk up and pet them. That's insane. What kind of a world are we going to live in?
Yeah. The dogs can get it though too, so I'm fine with that for a limited time, right? But no, let all of us make those decisions. But I do see going forward, not a total elimination of the handshake, but that people will think about the gesture more than they used to, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. In Germany, they were saying that there was some people who caught the virus simply because they used the same salt shaker in an employee cantina for lunch or whatever. So the stuff again that Dr. Jauregui and Dr. Diamond were talking about in terms of workplace sanitation and best practices too are going to be very important. People will start to think about these things a little bit more. The difference again was
this morning. I wanted to tell you the story. This morning, a dear friend of mine was denied entry into a store because he wasn't wearing a mask.
Wow. Now, what store chain, just so we all know?
It was.
Do you know?
He did tell me it was a particular store where he gets meat. You probably know the friend I'm talking about. It was in Orange County.
Okay.
He wasn't wearing a mask. Two guys with masks at the front door said, "You're not getting in here."
Wow.
Yeah, and so I wear a mask.
I don't know that I necessarily blame them. I mean, if a store had that policy, I would understand, because you heard about the one, right, where the lady who I think, she was a bit crazy, but she actually went into a store, purposefully coughed on $35,000. I don't know how you do this. $35,000 worth of produce. She coughed on it, and they had to throw it all out. So that's the sort of thing where if they say, okay, you have to wear a mask.
Obviously, she's legally, I would have her criminally liable, but obviously she's also civilly liable for all that damage and all the costs are involved in it. And, if people want to talk about laws that you can enforce, it would seem to me that if someone is intentionally spreading either the disease, knowing they have the disease, or intentionally spreading the fear, even if they don't know how that disease, coughing in a grocery store over the produce, for example. I think that is actually something the law can do something about. Yes. You cannot instill people with a fear of physical harm or spread physical harm. That the government.
It's like shouting fire in the crowded theater kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Or recklessly waving a gun around or shooting a gun into the air. All those things they not necessarily will, but they can cause physical harm, so the government can do something about it. Now, on the other hand, when it comes to preventing people, say if I wanted to go to work and have all my people come in with hazmat suits, nope, government won't let you do that. Your business shut down. Whatever steps you're taking, no matter how careful you are, no matter if we could promise me 100% no spread will come from your operating your business today, the government has still shut you down.
No, and that's unacceptable. That is unacceptable.
Yeah. Yes.
Definitely. And that's the sort of thing where, as an attorney, and I've talked to you about this too, as an attorney, we would be willing to do things that's possible to us to help fight that sort of thing if it continues going forward. That
Absolutely.
this, executive order, I can shut you down indefinitely stuff, where we are dealing with an unknown that's now starting to look like either it's already been taken care of, or maybe it wasn't as bad in the first place. We need to get everybody back to work and living as soon as possible. And now that we are armed with a significantly more, amount of information. I mean, we have more information about the, risk, totally. We have more information about how to mitigate our own personal risks and how to take care of the people that we care about. And there's also a lot more information out there about how to safely treat those who do get ill. We have been able to benefit from those who have gone before us as well. All of this information can be used now to get people back to work. This is not the beginning of some long thing.
Yeah. No, please, please, please. Whenever I hear, Sean Hannity or something on Fox News say, "Oh, well, this is rewriting the book on how we deal with diseases," I keep saying to myself, well, let's hope to hell that it's not this book that we're going to replay over and over and over. This book sucks.
Yeah, no, I mean, the
we can't
book.
do this again. What we've got to be thinking about is how to prevent this shutdown from ever happening again. Not how do we live with shutdowns and infectious diseases. That's madness. That's madness.
No. And we know now, because we look at places like Germany and South Korea, and now we have Apple and Google stepping up with some useful technology. We know ways to avoid this from happening again.
Right.
And let's use that information.
Indeed.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Anything else before we go? We are over our usual time.
Oh, wow. It was a great, though. I'm really glad we had those doctors here. They're heroes.
Yeah.
And those are the guys who should be getting the high fives and the encouragement.
Yeah, again, because they're putting their own resources at tremendous risk as well. That's what an entrepreneur does. And at this particular time as well, there are people who are in favor of a Gavin Newsom enacting his progressive agenda and retaining control over everybody.
Whereas
and these guys are saying, no, we're going to empower individuals.
I wish them all the profit in the world. I hope they become multimillionaires from this. I hope, right? And that's the way we should be looking at this.
Okay, well, I hope for one of two scenarios, and I didn't talk about this with them, right? So one scenario is that the guy who put on Medium the model about Iceland, where he says really most of the danger's already passed. I don't know if you saw that one. It's been going around a little bit. That's one scenario. In that scenario, unfortunately, the two doctors that we had on would probably not make very much money because the danger's gone. So that's great. But if that model is wrong, and there is still a significant risk going forward for people, and we do need to provide that level of reassurance and sensible protocols. Again, I had this sort of 4-prong approach going forward. You have tailored restrictions, maybe, for very vulnerable populations, et cetera, and how you interact with them. You have cautionary measures of the hand washing and the masks and the other things that those doctors with their expertise would recommend. We have the testing. Again, those doctors are trying to provide as much of that as possible. Resources are limited, but then we have the tech companies coming in with the tracking information that can turbocharge and make much more valuable the information that we get from the testing, the limited testing resources we have. You put all those together, then yes, people get back to work as soon as possible, even if there is a continuing danger.
Right.
It can be done. We are
and that
human
has
beings.
to be our focus.
Yes.
Very smart. That has to be our focus.
Definitely. So one of those two things. And maybe, again, I want, if there's a risk, I want those doctors to make a huge amount of money, like you say.
Yes.
It probably would be better for everybody. And if actually the whole thing is mostly behind us, that would be a beautiful thing. I don't know if that's realistic or not. We have no way of knowing. We won't know for a few months.
True. Yeah.
So
True. We really won't know for sure for weeks to come.
We really won't. So everybody, I hope you're doing well. Again, I do my meat meditation, sunshine and sleep as best as I possibly can. Take our little supplements to boost our immune system. Keep everybody, keep doing what you can given the circumstances. And we're going to as well. We're going to continue to try to bring you the best that we can on this show. So,
Stay healthy and safe.
yeah, you as well, James. Let me see if I can do the thing I need to do with the computer to actually end the show appropriately. My mouse is not behaving for me. Oh, here we go. Have a good day, everybody.